Hello. Hello. When you first learn to ride a motorcycle, the rules are like this. Don't die, one. Secondly, figure out the difference between the clutch and the ignition and the brake. And there's a little trick. It's called SIPD. It's an acronym that stands for survey the land, identify the possible issues, predict what could well happen, determine the best course of action, and execute. SIPD is powerful. It allows you in any context to think about what one needs to do to stay alive, to be prescient, hopefully, and to identify the best course of action moving forward. That's appropriate in my industry. I've spent the last 20 years in the asset management business, Wall Street for many of you, wearing pretty much this outfit for the last 20 years, but also the last 15 in hedge funds. And you have heard that for better or for worse, but what I can tell you about it is that it's a changing tide, obviously. The last 20 years, one could essentially tell a story. Two guys, a great idea. It's not the opening of a joke, they'd walk into a bar, but they'd tell a story about why they believed what they believed, their conviction, how it was prompted, what it meant, why it meant what it meant, and why you should care. And that changed because things got more competitive, they got more difficult. You had to explain risk and operational due diligence and the obligation of regulatory issues and inflation hedges and probabilities. And that even got more complicated because more people started coming in. You have 9,000 hedge funds, you have 3,800 fund of funds, and it's a $2 trillion global business. So how do you handle that? Especially as a woman, but how do you handle that type of environment? And it's about doing one thing that would seemingly be the antithesis of Wall Street, at least in our opinion, which is to tell an honest, true, definable, verifiable story. It really is storytelling, all of it, at the end of the day, as much as you're investing in anything, whether it's a person, whether it's a fund, whether it's a story, or one of your firms, or companies, or children. It starts with understanding the impetus. What is the conviction behind why people believe what they believe? One of my favorite lines is actually, it's not what you believe, it's why you believe it. How did you arrive at those convictions? What prompted them? Were they something that were posed upon you, or did you arrive at them from some great moment? And why do you believe them today? Something that I've been thinking of for a long time is actually building, for the last 10 or 15 years, a toolkit. And the job is not to walk through the assumption that you would ever care, I don't think anyone does, at the moment of impact, what I'm telling you, but the ability to defend it, to be able to verify its substance. And that's what we spend most of our time trying to do, especially on Wall Street, is to walk through every facet of the arc of an idea. And I think you're doing that in any job, in any business. What words don't exist anymore in our business? Differentiate. It's my favorite word of all. You have to differentiate yourself in whatever you're doing. It's an extremely assumptive word, in my opinion, because it implies that if I'm truly differentiating, it means I know all of you. I know what you care about, I know what you value, what you think risk is or not. I'm putting into context my value. How could I ever do that without knowing who you are, what's important to you, and what you care about? So I try to stay away from that word a bit in our business. The other word is low-hanging fruit. You've heard it a million times. The premise that it's been there the whole time. I just passed it by and missed it. It's not true anymore. It actually takes work. And the Rolodex, we know the Rolodex. I have 16,000 friends, 25,000 people on LinkedIn. I'd prefer the 4 a.m. club, which are the people that you can call at 4 a.m., that you know will return your call, that understand it's got to be a darn good reason for why you are, and to say, what do you need and when do you need it? Personal currency is something that I coined a few years ago, really on this premise, which is I realized that the interaction between people wasn't monetary at all. Here I am in Wall Street. It's not about money. It's about your ability to engage in personal currency. What does that mean? Personal currency is kind of like a marriage. It's kind of like a friendship or relationship. It's not about identifying the strengths that you have in each other, but the ability to understand, to identify, and to protect the insecurities of someone else. I spend most of my time sitting with endowments and foundation boards and watching the global juggernaut that is the capitalist movement, and thinking much more about words that we don't use, which is empathy, which it is that very definition, to get down to the core of what motivates people and how to protect the partnership, the friendship, and the promise that you make. There's a word called fiduciary, which means to be an active steward of capital. Here's the key word: irrespective of personal gain. It means that you're doing something maybe altruistically, but you're doing it without any impetus for anything back. The word reciprocity suddenly doesn't exist. You offer something up willingly because you would rather be thought to be a resource, to be at the ready, to be thought of as a 1-800 number or a 4 a.m. call, than you would be selling something, a strong arm push, a convincing, calling in a chit. That doesn't work, and it hasn't worked. And that's what's changed, especially since '08, when if anything taught us anything in the world, definitely in the US, it said nothing is ever what it seems. We have a new obligation, one in which we have to define and verify why we believe what we believe. I'm given all the time business plans on a new fund or a new firm and asked to give an opinion of what I think about it. And most of the time it's, I'm smart, I'm clever, I have a great idea, and I know it's going to work. And I love that spirit, and it's compelling. But I step back and say, where does it live? Where does the idea live? It's like a book. When you walk into a bookstore, where does this book live? Where is its natural home? And how do you arrive at it? What takes you there? And then once you understand that, then when you start getting into who's the natural buyer? Who would want it? What's the natural discourse of that discussion between people who may want what you have and where they could get it elsewhere? The classic return on investment. The next step from that is trying to understand what does one need to do to build trust, and more importantly than ever, to get people to care. You've heard a lot about that. How do you get people to care? And I think you do it by actually disenfranchising, pulling apart the machine that is an idea to explain how you arrived at it, how it can be verified, how it can be sustained. We're in an extraordinary time in the industry right now where you have an archive in ideas. That's really what your currency is. It's your ability to have manifested all these disparate pieces of information into a place that you get to own and share with other people. It is the It's a Wonderful Life where there's nothing that you take with you is that which you leave behind. It's this obligation to do something better than what one is, which is counterintuitive, one would think, to be making money. And yet traveling in 20 countries around the world and having spent a ton of time overseas of late, I can tell you that the overarching theme is that discussion, which is listening. Imagine that. It's not talking or convincing, it's actually doing a better job to determine what matters to someone in that context. In preparation for today, I was actually talking to a 25-year-old this morning, and I asked him questions around capitalism and what it meant to him and his new wife and his new child. And his response was, I'm lost. I was a gold star, weren't we all? We were told that we would all win, that it would all work out, and now it hasn't. And now I can't get a job, I'm stuck, I'm petrified, I'm paralytic. Tell me what to do. Tell me where to go. So what are we watching? What are we watching, especially even in San Francisco? I was at a t-shirt store the other day, and they're teaching someone how to tie a bow tie. I was walking down the street the other day as well and going into a pastry shop, and they're teaching you how to make bread. There's this extraordinary change where craftsmanship, the ability to understand how one does what then one does, is itself compelling. What an extraordinary new idea that is. And he said, you know, now what? Why does my husband, my amazing husband, sit in line for 20 minutes to get a cup of coffee, just to get that perfect swirl at the end? It's for one reason. It was made with you in mind. The profound wisdom today, the profound ownership of wealth is in the customization, is the time and craftsmanship with which you put into anything that you do, into your parenting, into your business, into your growth, to understand where it fits, to understand what the audience is looking for in that context. And being on Wall Street, which I hope for the next 30 years, there's actually a creed that I've put forth in my team and in the business, which is the following. I'll paraphrase it. Essentially, it's, I commit to the following creed, to the promise, which is this: I will only tie my integrity and credibility to that which I understand, which I can verify with my own eyes, and which I could substantiate with my own brain. Original thought is exhausting, mind you. It's easier to cut and paste or read something someone else wrote. So suddenly when you have to interpret it yourself and defend it yourself, It's why I recommend to anyone who wants to go get an MBA to study philosophy, the structuring of argument, Kant, Hume, Wittgenstein. All of it is tied back to being able to defend a thesis. I'm a trial lawyer. I have to prove something is sustainably true. And English, to know how to write, to know how to communicate, to actually have an honest, true dialogue where you're not convincing anyone. You're merely building a thesis that the other person has already arrived at. What a delight. So Wall Street itself is not, in some ways, this heavy burden of the capitalist bent. And capitalism globally now are people that are global. It's not the American capitalism, it's the world. And we have this extraordinary chance, in some ways, to be able to demonstrate that. It's context. It comes back to SIPTE again, but it's also assumptive, I think, for all of us, to think that people want, with all due respect, want to know what you have to say. And even though everyone has a story and a book in them and a song in them, and it's all lovely and beautiful, there's something deeper. There's something deeper, which is the obligation to tell a story, whether it be about why one would invest in a hedge fund or why one would be altruistic toward a nonprofit organization that can show verifiable proof of its efficacy. I spend most of my time in any mentoring with people in our business trying to get down to why they want to be doing what they're doing. And the answer most of the time is, I'm not happy. I don't want to be in this job. I don't really like it. I don't like the way I'm treated. I don't like... And so we build a case, we build a value proposition that prompts them to think differently. And it all ties back to this. When I was about 10 or 12 years old, I figured out that the only way that I could, not to say differentiate myself, but get people to listen in the beginning, dawning age of modern technology was to write letters. Imagine then, back then, what was it, 12 cents, 13 cents? Even now, I write probably 60 letters a week for 20 years. True story. Every single night, I'll find people that I care about, that I enjoy, and I'll write a personal letter about something about them that I learned from them, the personal currency that they offered me, a newfound wisdom, a new observation, and I'll put it in the mail, and they'll get it. And for that moment, I've had an authentic personal relationship. They open it, wherever they are. To think that someone would hand-deliver something that you sent to them halfway around the world, in Switzerland or South Africa or New Zealand, and to hand it to you, and to open it, and to have it be handwritten words that were thoughtful. What music were they listening to? What were they thinking about? And to have that single, insular, perfect, intimate moment is something that no technology could ever deliver. And so I strive to that. That's how I treat my clients, my friends, and I recommend that to all of my friends, to find the one thing that you have that is authentically true. And all of this sounds practical, realistic, obvious, but I think what the hardest thing to do in a world of Wall Street, where the perception is your title, your name, your brand, I fly against all that. Maybe living in San Francisco and commuting to New York for 17 years will do that to you, but I can tell you that the minute you land there, wherever there is, there's a new moment where you actually get to tell a definably authentic story, the audacity of being authentic, which sometimes the answer is, I don't know. We're not appropriate for you. We're not going to take your money. Not now. We'll let you know when. Maybe there'd be somebody that would be better, more perfectly fitted. What a surprise to be able to do that. So, all to say, we're at this extraordinary moment, and it comes back to, despite SIPTE, where you have the opportunity to scan, identify, predict, determine, and execute, there's also the line that says, I again saw under the sun that the race is not for the swift, and bread is not to the wise, nor is wealth to the discerning, for time and chance overtake them all. Thank you so very much.